Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Future Tech podcast series. It's me, Charlie Sell, the Group MD for Arrows Group, where I'm interviewing CIOs, CTOs, thought leaders within our fastest growing tech businesses, asking them a bit about their story, thoughts on emerging technology, and the all-important career advice for many of our STEM graduate listeners. So really pleased to have Sean Hunter with me today. Sean is the CIO of OakNorth. OakNorth is a global fintech business. They're a bank in the UK and a rising fintech business across the rest of the world, and really going places. So it'll be great to hear that part of the story and have Sean, first of all, kick off with a bit about him. So Sean, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Charlie.
And you mentioned you've recently come back from a week off, so it's been a very, very busy first week back in the office, I hear.
Yeah, it sure has. We got a ton to do and so on. All good, but very busy. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, look, we always appreciate the time of all of our guests, and so let's jump straight into it. And yeah, we'd love to know a bit about your story and your career and how you got into technology.
Sure thing. So I have a bit of an unconventional background. If you looked at my CV, you wouldn't necessarily think. I have a degree in jazz, contemporary, and popular music, which is not usual for CIO. But I've always been involved in tech ever since I was very young. My father is a chemical engineer, and his father was a mechanical engineer. So I come from a line of engineers. And my dad used to give me and my brother pieces of pocket money to do little bits of computer software for him, sort of developing process models for chemical processes and that kind of stuff when we were sort of 8 or 9 years old.
That young.
And so, yeah. So I've always programmed computers, and I used computer programming jobs to pay my way through my degree in postgrad. And then after my postgrad, my music career sort of hit a bump because I had tendon problems and couldn't carry on playing. But my programming career had sort of taken off, and I found my way into a .com during the .com era, where I was the IT director running a large group of software engineers. Then I spent some time in finance at Goldman Sachs. And then I was at a software company called Palantir Technologies, which is a data analysis software that specializes in helping large enterprises make sense of all the crazy data they have. And when I left OakNorth, I was sort of looking around. I mean, when I left Palantir, I was looking around for something to do, and I got contacted by OakNorth, and it seemed really interesting because it is at its heart a data analysis challenge, but it has real practical implications. Because what OakNorth does is essentially try to lend to small businesses and entrepreneurs, and these are difficult businesses to lend to, and they get a bad service from existing banks because it's too hard for banks to do the analysis to actually figure out exactly what they need and so on. And that means they get very sort of overlooked by these banks. But in actual practice, using technology, you can actually give them a much better service. And so it's a very interesting technological problem. And at its heart is obviously a data analysis challenge.
Yeah, fantastic. And you're so right around, I think it doesn't matter really. All industries are sort of merged in the fact that data is a key driver across pretty much most industry sectors, isn't it? Albeit finance is obviously one where it's critical in regards to protection of data. But so what's your thoughts then, thinking about emerging technology and what you live on a daily basis? Where do you see the emerging technology moving to?
Well, as you said, sort of data, I mean, I've sort of fundamentally believed for some time that almost all important problems can be in some sense attributed as data problems. And you know, if you look around you, a very, very large number of the real challenges that face the world could be addressed by sort of better policy actions by governments, better management by companies, et cetera. But the reason that these people don't do things better is oftentimes not having good data, not being able to analyze data well, and so on. So I think data analysis is at the heart of almost all of the interesting technology that I'm most excited about. And I would say those are sort of two main buckets. The one is data science, and the second one is AI and machine learning. And by data science, really what most people mean is sort of applying some sort of quite old-fashioned statistical techniques, but using technology to handle the sheer volume of data, both in terms of the amount and the number of data sources and so on, and make sense of all of that stuff. And then AI and machine learning is obviously a really big hot topic, and is sort of a subcategory of data science, but AI and machine learning is really all about how can we get machines to do things that we can't specify well to them sort of upfront. So obviously we've known for some time that computers are great at following a very specific recipe to sort of crank out computations, but AI and machine learning is more around how can we give things a sort of general recipe and have them figure out some of the details that we maybe as humans don't even know ourselves. And obviously that's a very, very important emerging topic of analysis, and can be used for all kinds of interesting practical problems, including the ones we deal with at OakNorth, but then lots of other ones out in industry.
Yeah, and well, I couldn't agree with you more in regards to the involvement and how important both data and also AI machine learning is. Although there's a question that has been raised to me from a number of students actually wanting to know, about the security side of data, I guess, because they almost come hand in hand as more data is becoming accessible, and especially in finance and fintech. What's your thoughts about the sort of the balance of increased data and infrastructure versus needing to increase the security of it?
Yeah, incredibly important question. And actually there's like another whole dimension to it, which is the ethical side of it, which I haven't actually touched on, but which is very important. From our standpoint, like as a fintech that works with banks, obviously banks are regulated, and so they have data security obligations to their regulators, but also to their customers. And their customers trust them with data. If they in turn, allow us to do analysis on that data and we abuse that trust or whatever, they would obviously lose reputation, and it would be terminal for our business. It would finish us. Like literally, a single data security breach could be terminal for our fintech. And I think that's true for a lot of fintechs. And so we take data security incredibly seriously. And I think from a tech career standpoint, there's a whole sort of world of information security jobs and so on out there, and a ton of very interesting tech research in that area. I think where the rubber hits the road for us is figuring out how we can work with a customer such that they can get very, very comfortable, so they fully know that we're not doing anything we're not supposed to be doing. They're fully in control of all of their data at all times. But by the same token, we can provide them with insights and analysis and so on. And this is a very interesting technical challenge from an infrastructure point of view, because in the old world, back when I started my career, if you wanted to work with a large bank or something like that, then what you would do is you would go and install a bunch of, machines with blinking lights in their server rooms, and you would update your software, once every year, once every 2 years or whatever, and it would be a huge painful process. Well, as a fintech, we release new software every single week. So that's just not going to cut it for us, and it would make our software very out of date very quickly. And so it's very important for us to be able to use cloud and so on. But obviously we have to do it in a way that allows our customers to be fully confident that we're kind of trustworthy and we're not doing anything bad. And so the sort of nitty-gritty technical challenges associated with that are very important. It also is crucial to our business model, so we can scale, so we can release new features fast, so we can roll out to new customers quickly, and so on. Because obviously in that old model where you can only update banks once a year or whatever, that means you have to support ancient old versions of software for absolutely ages. So there's all kinds of technical sort of ramifications to that slow update model. And therefore, there's tremendous benefits both to the customer and to us of being able to move much faster.
Yeah.
And that means tech is central to that.
And that last point, I couldn't agree with more how important tech is behind all of this, because, as you say, the old world of having large server rooms and really only needing to sort of do updates once or twice once a year, versus the regular sprints now and the continuous development cycles. And I guess one of the other questions that gets asked a lot to me, though, is also understanding that now security is super important, data science, data engineering, AI, machine learning. But historically, a lot of companies would outsource, and let's focus on security, for example, where a lot of businesses would say, well, we're not industry experts within the security side, so that's the bit that we're going to outsource. However, what I've seen is a trend now where businesses are wanting to bring that in-house, and so actually to have true control, we need to own that, and so CISOs and having your own SOC teams are quite important. Where do you sit when you're thinking about the growth of OakNorth? Will you build the teams internally or use externals to provide that capability?
Yeah, it's a super important question. I think from a strategic perspective, every business has to wrestle with this question of like what bites, what things they actually have comparative advantage, what they're actually good at, what they should do themselves versus outsourcing. And, from a standpoint as a weird company that's both a bank in the UK and a fintech that works with banks outside the UK, we obviously have regulatory obligations and so on, because there are various rules for banks about which processes you're not allowed to outsource. And so banks are required to keep certain functions in-house because obviously, your financial regulator cares about the stability of the financial system. So if all the banks, for example, were outsourcing all their cybersecurity, and then that cybersecurity provider just went bust, suddenly, you might be in a position where all the banks had no cybersecurity. So they can't allow that to happen. So there are various obligations. So from our standpoint, we work from the point of view that, okay, we're great at tech. That's what we do. However, we work with partners that are really excellent in certain places. So for example, we use AWS for our cloud provider. Obviously, AWS is the absolute best in the world at providing cloud infrastructure. Obviously, Microsoft and Google are also hot on their heels, and as is Alibaba. And so the sort of tech infrastructure layer we outsource. However, we have a really great InfoSec person running our security policy, and we have a really good DevOps team. Those are all in-house. And we have a really great AppSec team doing our application security development. And they're in-house as well. Then we use externals to kind of validate, hey, how good is our posture externally? Like, can we improve anything, etc. And I think it's good to get that mix, so that you can be sure that you're up to date with the latest and greatest, but you're also not spending your time, because obviously you only have so much time, you only have so much focus. So you've got to focus on the things that you're going to really move the ball forward.
Yeah, and that is a great balance to have, I think. And InfoSec, AppSec are two areas also. I mean, we as a business, we see that as the largest growth sectors as well, because it's not, as we were saying earlier, it's not just about the engineering side. You have to make it secure, you have to make it robust, but you have to keep investing in the future technologies as well, i.e. AI, machine learning, and deep learning, I suppose, are the things that people sort of continually sort of talk about. So moving on to the last part of the podcast then, for our listeners, where many of them are now, it's exam season right now, so they'll be finishing exams the next couple of months and thinking about their first step into a career and into technology. What one or two pieces of advice could you give our listeners, when you're interviewing or thinking about them getting a job, that will really help them stand out or get that foot on the ladder?
Yeah, so I think the number one piece of advice I would give is like maximize your own personal impact. So try and think about what you're good at and where you can really have an impact, because that will help for a number of reasons. That'll obviously help your career because you can point it at a lot of things that you're doing that are making a real difference. But it also will help you personally because you'll feel satisfied and fulfilled in what you're doing because you're doing something that makes a big difference. I think there are a lot of places and careers where you're just, a cog in a giant machine, and it's really, really hard to feel any personal satisfaction because you don't necessarily see the outcomes of the work you do. And I think that's difficult to cope with from a career standpoint, but it's also actually not great because, you want to be able to point to things and say, hey, I was one of the people who made that thing happen. And you can derive great satisfaction from it. It can also help your career. Tangibly, if you've just sort of graduating, things you can do that will really help. Obviously, goes without saying, if you can program, tremendously helpful. Specific tech that's useful. Almost everyone could benefit from being able to program in Python, for example. You don't necessarily, that doesn't mean that you necessarily end up programming in Python. Like over my career, I've programmed in every single programming language under the sun, pretty much, like just because I'm ancient. But one of the things to realize is it's way better to keep a growth mindset and think, hey, like if I go to a new job and they say, hey, we don't use Python, we use Scala or, whatever, like some other technology, you should back your own ability to learn those things really quickly. So I would say go deep on one or two things. Python is tremendously useful just because there's such a wide variety of things it can be used for. And it's the sort of lingua franca of data analysis, typically. So there's all sorts of, deep learning frameworks. You want to check out Keras, TensorFlow, NLTK, all these things that are, very commonly used in the sort of machine learning community. They're all written in Python and accessible from Python. So that's one thing I would say. The other thing is just, keep a open mind. What you start off doing isn't necessarily what you end up doing. And there's lots and lots of great programmers that I've worked with who started their careers doing something a little different. And so, go where things are interesting, where you think you're going to learn the most and where you're going to have personal impact, because that'll help you in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, Sean, thank you for both of those points. Again, super valid. And I couldn't agree with you more both the first one, maximize your personal impact, and that will keep you satisfied. And I do think we need to remind people that, the job should be something that you enjoy, and it's not about a paycheck. It's about something that you can look yourself in the mirror and you get up in the morning and say, I'm developing myself as much as contributing to a business. And just from my personal view, again, from what we see, that growth mindset, I couldn't agree with you more. Gone are the days where someone is a lifelong C++ developer and that's what they'll do for the rest of their career. It's the whole polyglot concept now, but to have one or two really strong pure languages or core languages, but to be able to be agile enough to learn others. And again, Python, we see it all the time. It's probably one of the most in-demand skills for machine learning and AI when we're working with clients. And so if we can increase that funnel for many of our listeners, and also about diversity and many other things, but if we can increase the funnel of people learning core skills in these future technologies, we're only going to be able to advance that much quicker and add more talent to businesses like OakNorth. So super valid. And well, that's our podcast nearly come to an end. That's flown by. And Sean, thank you very much. The takeaways I took, one, you don't even have to be studying a STEM subject to fall into STEM or to follow STEM. Being a jazz background, albeit technology being a passion, I think that's also a super relevant thing for people as we're trying to get more people interested in technology. You need to have a passion for it. You don't necessarily need to have studied it to have a footstep in there.
Yeah, and that's important, sorry to interrupt you, for STEM people, is don't think just because you studied, biology or, chemical engineering or whatever, that, you will necessarily be at a disadvantage if you go into an interview for a computer science job. It's not the case.
Thank you for that. Because actually I was speaking to someone the other day and they educated me that STEM is now moving to STEAM, where it's not just about science, technology, engineering and maths, arts. is also,
Interesting.
people with an art background, also because of the need for UI and UX and the ability to make products and platforms engaging. The industry can attract a variety of people as long as you fundamentally want to do that job, and as we said earlier, the growth mindset, and that it's going to maximize your personal impacts. We shouldn't be afraid, should they? The talent pool should be as wide as possible. So yeah, thank you for your time. Hope you enjoyed being part of the show.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me on.
Great. And to all our listeners, that is another episode of our Future Tech podcast series. The podcast is on our landing page, arrowspodcast.com, but also on the career platforms of our 20 partner universities and on Spotify, Apple Play, and Google. So a link will be coming out on LinkedIn in the next couple of weeks, where you'll be able to find this direct podcast. And to everyone listening, here's another show. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Thank you for listening to Future Tech with Charlie Sell, a podcast from Arrows Group Global. Please subscribe to this podcast so that you never miss an episode. Arrows Group is a global technology recruitment and workforce solutions provider who focus on people at the heart of all our interactions. With in-depth technology expertise and global candidate communities, we offer bespoke solutions to every client and candidate. To find out more, visit arrowsgroup.com.